This episode of CppCast is sponsored by Undo Software. Debugging C++ is hard, which is why Undo Software's technology is proven to reduce debugging time by up to 2/3. Memory corruptions, resource leaks, race conditions, and logic errors can now be fixed quickly and easily. So visit undo-software.com to find out how its next-generation debugging technology can help you find and fix your bugs in minutes, not weeks. CppCast is also sponsored by CppCon, the annual week-long face-to-face gathering for the entire C++ community. Get your ticket now during early bird registration until July 1st. Episode 51 of CppCast with guest Jens Veller, recorded March 29th, 2016. In this episode, we talk about compiler bugs and concepts without concepts. Then we talk to Jens Veller from Meeting C++. Jens talks to us about the Meeting C++ conference and user group community. Welcome to episode 51 of CppCast, the only podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm your host, Rob Irving, joined by my co-host, Jason Turner. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Rob. How about you?
Doing pretty good. So last week, Jason, you announced that you had started your own YouTube channel.
Yep.
And you have another side project that you wanted to share this week, right?
Yeah, so just a couple of weeks ago, I officially released my first project with O'Reilly Media, which is a video training series on C++ best practices.
Awesome.
I have no idea how well that's selling or anything yet, but it was an interesting project to work on.
And was this somewhat based on the CPP best practices website that you started a while back?
Yes, it's definitely inspired by what I did there, and I also mix in some stuff from the C++ core guidelines.
Awesome. Well, I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I definitely recommend everyone go check it out. So at the top of our episode, I'd like to read a piece of feedback. This week, Dan wrote to us on Twitter, and he said he just listened to the Artillery CppCast episode. That was one with Mark Logan. We did it a couple months back in January, and he says, really cool stuff, well explained. Those JavaScript and C++ episodes have definitely turned out to be pretty popular.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts about the show as well. You can always reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or email us at feedback@cppcast.com. And don't forget to leave us reviews on iTunes. Joining us this week is Jens Veller. Jens is the organizer and founder of Meeting C++. He's been doing C++ since 1998. He's an active member of the C++ community. And from being a moderator at C++.de, an organizer of his own C++ user group since 2011 in Dusseldorf, his roots are in the C++ community. Today's main work is running the Meeting C++ platform, including the conference, website, social media, and recruiting. And his main role has become being a C++ evangelist. As this, he speaks and travels to other conferences and user groups around the world. Jens, welcome to the show.
Hi. Nice to be on CppCast.
That's great.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Well, we had a couple of news articles we wanted to talk about. Jens, feel free to chime in on any of these, and then we'll start talking to you about all the great work you've been doing. This first one is about compiler bugs found when porting Chromium to VC 2015. And I guess this comes from someone on the Google team who was working on porting the Chromium project to Windows. And he found several compiler bugs while doing this, and he wrote about some of the specific bugs, and he also just wrote about the process of reporting these bugs to Microsoft. And if you do ever find bugs with Visual Studio's compiler, if you give them a nice reproducible test case, they apparently are very, very good at addressing that bug. Maybe a little bit better when it's coming from Google, but I think they're pretty good with anyone reporting bugs if they have a nice test case to work with.
Yeah, he also mentions in the comments that being an MVP helps also.
Yes, this is true. But he really makes it sound like if you have, a nice, easy to reproduce test case that they'll get on it.
Yeah, there's an interesting article. There was in the comments, someone mentions a tool called Delta debugging, or an idea of tools called Delta debugging. And I'm like a huge tools guy, and I'd never heard of this before.
Yeah.
And it's the idea is tools that can automatically reduce your test code down into something that still reproduces the bug.
Oh, that's interesting.
And there's a couple of links to some open source ones that work with C++ that can do that, and I have got to check that out at some point.
So that'd be a great way of creating these small reproducible test cases.
Theoretically. But apparently large binary search kind of things where it's removing code until so it could take a very long time to run, but it's interesting.
And it would be run automatically. It wouldn't be you running it and testing everything out manually. Yeah.
Theoretically, anyhow.
Very cool. Jens, was there anything you wanted to comment on with this?
This post reminds me of a similar post where somebody drew comparisons to LTO and compiling LibreOffice with GCC and Clang. So I think compiling large projects, which with newer compiler versions, is always an interesting thing, which shows up all kinds of bugs or new things or different angles, which probably don't show up in our everyday projects. So
yeah, but what was the size of the Chromium project? I think I saw it was like 90,000 code files, something like that, or 48,000 C++ files and 40,000 headers.
And also, it says over 100 open source projects are also pulled in by it.
Wow. It's a very large project.
Yes.
Okay. This next one is a practical guide to bare metal C++. And probably not going to go into too much detail on this one, but it's worth pointing out in case you're interested in doing some embedded programming where I believe C is still very popular in the embedded world, but I think the point of this guide is to showcase some of the advantages using C++ in that kind of environment. Yeah,
it looks like a pretty extensive document.
Yeah, and the link I'm going to put in the show notes, it's to a gitbook.com address where you can get a PDF or a Kindle format so you can read this as a book. You don't need to just read it on the website, which is nice. I've never heard of Gitbook before.
I'm actually using it to host a version of CPP Best Practices.
Oh, okay. Is it just hosted from a GitHub repo and they give you this extra stuff to get you the PDF and the Kindle stuff out of it?
Yes, it uses the markdown in your GitHub repo.
Very nice. What were you going to say, Jens?
Yeah, last year we had the embedded as a theme track at Meeting C++, so that's definitely a hot topic, an interesting topic. But it's also very constrained by the industry, so that the advantages of using C++, I think it's a very, very good overview and how you can apply C++ to the embedded domain. But a lot of the industry is not able to actually move forward into that because of their constraints internally in the industry. So it's always very interesting to talk to those people from the embedded domain, as it's a completely different world.
Right.
So what was your experience from the conference? Did you go to any of those talks about the embedded stuff yourself?
I think I've been to one talk from Wouter von Ooyen.
Okay.
But usually during the conference, I'm usually very busy, and I have seen most talks while editing. So that's kind of, I get to see most talks then when I edit the videos.
I'll have to go and look at those talks and see who you had as speakers, because that's one topic we still have not really gone into too much depth on in the show, embedded development in C++.
Yeah, we talked about it early on, and I never really got any guests on.
Yeah. And this last article is a blog post on concepts without concepts. We're not going to be getting concepts in C++ for a while. And this author was going over some ways that a library developer could kind of give you some of the features of concepts without using it, I guess. Jason, would you say that's a good way to characterize this article?
Yes, I would say that's a good way to characterize the article. It's I actually had this in the back. I didn't thoroughly read the article when I first saw it on Twitter, but I had it in the back of my mind when I was just adding a new feature to ChaiScript, and I'm like, okay, I need to put a static assert at the top of this template so that our users have like an actual reason why this is failing.
Right, and he goes on beyond this static assert method,
Yes.
And you could actually just turn off the functionality in your method if the constraints are not met, and then you wouldn't get the really ugly compiler errors that we all know and love that are associated with bad template code.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you get less.
Right.
You can enable if it's nice, but it can really get you pull your hairs out when you get into overload resolution things. And I had one case a few weeks ago where I overloaded for null pointers, and this made then enable if fail. And so I had to remove the overload for null pointers and do it somehow else. Or just also if you use enable if, you have to do it on almost everything and everywhere, and it can get kind of tedious to select the right functions in every use case.
Yeah. That's the kind of thing sometimes with enable F, I still feel like I'm just trying random things until I get the compiler to do what I want it to do. Like I don't feel like I always 100% understand exactly what I'm asking for.
Right.
And
so, sorry, what was that, Jens?
Yeah. Regarding concepts, I got an interesting feedback last year at C++ Now. For a while, concepts has been available in Boost as a library, Boost concepts. And also Eric Niebler has in his range library version where I think he has re-implemented concepts in his own macros. And so if you want to make use of these things, it's available for a while, and it's been used in some libraries. But I also have seen people say, well, maybe concepts is not that important as it's been available through a Boost library or other meanings, and it's not used that heavily. And that's actually one of the few negative views on concepts I only could find. And then there's a lot of hype. And I hope we really have concepts soon and other compilers available, not just GCC 6.
Yeah, I feel like it is kind of important, at least for the standard library, to have concepts, particularly for new users of C++, because sometimes you just get a wall of errors that can take a very long time to parse. And if we can get past that, that would be great.
Yes, yeah. I agree on that totally.
Definitely. Yes. So Jens, let's start talking about meeting C++. In your bio, you talked about how you've been writing C++ since 1998. How did you go about going from just a normal C++ developer to becoming the C++ evangelist, as you put it?
Well, I've been interested in C++ since I've kind of by accident turned into a C++ programmer in my high school. And so for a long time, my home or my heritage regarding C++ has been an online community, an online forum, like in the beginning of the 2000s. A lot of people probably have, had their online forums. And so I've been for a long time a member of C++DE, which is now C++.net. And over time, I've become involved in the organization, like being a moderator for a forum. And then with the user group that started when I was self-employed, I had started doing community work for an operating system called MeeGo, which was based on Nokia and Intel. And so this kind of drew me into the world of community work for Linux-based mobile OS, which is also kind of a little bit of my background, as I have worked for Vodafone in the past. And so during that time, I kind of learned the basics of community work, which I already had some basics from the online phase, and then the offline work with user groups. But also then later, when MeeGo was discontinued, I thought it would be nice to to continue this work for C++ itself and not anymore for any vendor or anything new coming up or any other platform. And so in 2011, the C++ user group in Düsseldorf got started. And as looks a bit like a follow-up today, but it's just in 2012, I was visiting C++ Now, for the first time, and I've been talking to a few people how they organized the conference, and I kind of, got the feeling that this was a user group and my connections, I had through, the community work would be able to organize a similar event. Mm-hmm. That's how Meeting C++ got started.
So for how long has this been like your full-time effort being the community evangelist, community organizer for C++?
I think it's kind of since 2014, it's 100% that
wow.
I only do this the last 2 years. And originally I have been a freelancer for C++. And in 2013 I kind of could figure out that freelancing and organizing a conference does not go well together, as the conference often requires a certain amount of time where I'm not available to clients, and clients usually want 100%, and it's hard to sell only like 2 or 3 months, and they're like, most projects are like at least 6 months, and they were like, don't care if if you have a hobby like just organizing a conference. And also I figured out that if I wanted to do the work for user groups, etc. more seriously, I would probably have to take on a different model. And so I kind of figured out if the conference grows large enough, I can make this like a crowdfunding, that my work for the community is funded through the conference, and my job more or less today is to maintain the network behind Meeting C++ for C++. And this all has its roots in 2012, when the world was like still very, very different. We had a new standard, but most people did not have a lot of high expectations on the standard, as it just was, the standardization was really, really weak for the past years, and now we had a new standard, and people expected that for the next 5 or 6 years we would not have another standard. People did not expect that standardization would actually catch up and do things like that. And also back then, isocpp.org did not exist. And so one of the things which I always have seen is that C++ has, as a free language, a certain lack in marketing and organization of things like community. And I thought, well, if I have a conference and have a conference website, I don't want the conference website to be down for like 6 months and then suddenly it's, hey, we have a conference again. Mm-hmm. And so I thought about how to use the conference as a tool for the community to motivate people to get user groups started and to get more information out about C++ to other people, which not everybody is able to go to the conference.
Right. So I think most of our listeners are probably already somewhat familiar with meetingcpp.com, but could you maybe go over everything that's involved with Meeting C++? There's the conference, there's website. What else is there?
Well, the website is, I think today the interesting points on the website are this year's conference, which will be announced in the next days. So when the episode is up, people should be able to find it on the website. Oh. And then there's my blog, where I do blog the things which I do with C++, which is currently mainly building a CMS for the website. And then there's a section for user groups, which shows if there's a local user group in your area. And there's of course a news section, and in this news section you can see like which different things are currently happening for Meeting C++, which is mostly the conference. But I also post once a month an overview on upcoming user group meetings for the next coming months. So the next posting in the next few days after the announcement will be this post handling the user group meetings for April.
Would you be okay with sharing that date now? Because we're not going to publish this episode for a few days.
Oh, it's already known. So yeah, it's 18th, 19th November.
Okay.
And yeah, this year's conference, the theme track will be game dev, and the keynote will be held. The opening keynote will be held by Bjarne Strostrup, and for the second keynote, I'm still thinking about who should do it.
Okay.
Very cool.
So, where is it going to be held this year? Berlin again?
Yes.
Okay.
For this, and probably next year, I'm staying in Berlin. So.
I wanted to interrupt this discussion for just a moment to bring you a word from our sponsors. You have an extensive test suite, right? You're using TDD, continuous integration, and other best practices. But do all your tests pass all of the time? Getting to the bottom of intermittent and obscure test failures is crucial if you want to get the full value from these practices. And Undo Software's live recorder technology allows you to easily fix the bugs that don't otherwise get fixed. Capture a recording of failing tests in your test suites and debug them offline so that you can collaborate with your development teams and customers. Get your software out of development and into production much more quickly, and be confident that it is of higher quality. Visit undo-software.com to see how they can help you find out exactly what your software really did, as opposed to what you expected it to do, and fix your bugs in minutes, not weeks.
All right, you mentioned your CMS that you're building. And so you're writing a CMS in C++, right?
Yes.
How's that going?
It takes a bit longer than I thought. It's a serious rabbit hole to go down through, but I'm pretty far. Actually, currently I have a prototype which works and already spits out working websites without CSS, etc. But I still have to improve it a lot to actually be able to port my website. And one thing I've been working on in the last weeks has been an API for accessing JSON libraries through generic code. And so originally I planned to have the website first done and then announce a conference, but that hasn't worked out. So I will redo the website in summer. And currently it's in the prototype phase, pretty far.
Is this going to be an open source project? Or are you going to let all the C++ bloggers out there use your CMS to make their websites?
I plan to open source this, but
okay.
I'm not sure if this workflow is for me it's an internal tool, so I'm not sure if the workflow is really the thing which people are looking for. The CMS currently has a front end built in Qt as a UI, where I will then build my website with. And you have to be pretty familiar with that workflow, which I've been for years. It's kind of, like I would like to, the good parts of the tool which I'm using currently is basically ported into Qt. And on the other hand, I plan to split this into a library part, which then, you could use to build something like Jekyll or something, which I currently don't aim at building something like Jekyll. And yeah, so the CMS is for static pages. It's not for dynamic content. So at the end, it's a website generator, and the website is then uploaded via any connection to the network and served via any web server.
So I just moved my personal site to Jekyll, and there seems to be a lot of moving towards statically compiled web pages. Is that the route your CMS is going? I'm just curious. Is it statically or is it dynamic?
Yes.
It's okay. That's interesting.
I've been thinking about since last year, January, what to do and what route to go down. And at the end, I thought, well, just build a small CMS for yourself. Then I have like everything in my control, because my problem is that I don't want to redo the website every 2-3 years when the tools are changing again in a new version and often are not really compatible to the previous version, like you already could see with Jekyll now, with Jekyll 2 and Jekyll 3.
Right.
And I don't want to fall in that trap to have to redo my website every few years. So that's why I decided it's going to cost me probably a lot of time to get to that point where I can do that. But I just want to be on 100 control of my own technology stack. That's a decision I made last year.
So, okay, since you're building in C++, what's the biggest headache that you've hit so far? I know, for instance, it took you a while to settle on a JSON library to use. It looked like, anyhow, from your tweets.
The JSON libraries, I looked into far too many JSON libraries, how they were implemented, and I even found out that there is 2 libraries with the same name. So, and I found I have done my research now with JSON and C++, and I think I'm soon going to blog about it. I kind of started to work on my own API, which is a generic API, and then it uses lots of enable if to kind of drill down the interfaces in the implementation of the other libraries. And so I will be able to plug and play. That's a long time goal, to plug and play with like 3 or 4 different JSON libraries, so that I'm not having to tie my code to a certain JSON library. And currently I'm going with RapidJSON.
Okay.
We had some questions that came in on Twitter when you announced that you were going to be on the show. Vasily wrote in, it's interesting to hear how you've built this community, and he wanted to know what sorts of benefits and challenges you've had on the way.
I think at the beginning, the first thing at the beginning was the problem to really understand what the whole thing is, what it is today. When I just had the conference and was not sure what to do or in what direction to go. Should I have like an online community like other people do? And on the other hand, I wanted to not to reinvent something which already existed. So I've been for a long time in online forums. I know the pain which they bring, and I didn't want to have another forum or user-generated content on my website. And so I think one of the benefits is definitely that I have access to this vast network of C++ programmers. So it makes it interesting if I have like some problem, then I can just turn to that network and go to have like people of all kinds of from all over the world turn in and have their opinion on a certain thing. And on the other hand, I've been really interested in how networks work and how human networks grow, and so it's really interesting to see this from the inside. And it's also kind of crazy to see that the conference itself has grown, but also the network behind the conference, the followership in social media has now for 2 years in a row doubled, and it's really gotten a lot bigger than I thought at the beginning.
Wow.
So, and one of my goals definitely from the beginning was to build something like a network where I am able to share content into the C++ community I mean, I know how much work it is to blog. I know how much work it is to make videos, and I want to really kind of like ISO-CPP has a similar idea, but they're going slightly different route than I do, and I'm glad that both of those models exist, and that we actually now have ways to really to bring the content to the readers, and also to give people which do things like JSON now this weekly, which is kind of new, or like when you started the podcast, I was directly a big fan of that, and thought it's probably the best thing I can just do to support you guys is just share it over my network.
Yeah, and we definitely appreciate that a lot. It definitely helped us find a lot of listeners early on.
Yeah, it did.
I know you work with a lot of user groups. Are most of the user groups you work with in Europe, or are there a decent amount in America as well?
I think there's a decent amount in Europe and in America, and there's even a user group in Vietnam. There's user groups in India. There's one user group in Sydney, and a few others. Asia in general is kind of difficult, as it has a big difference in culture, so that on the usual ways where I look for user groups, they probably I haven't been contacted and I haven't been able to find them because a lot of them are using their own web platforms or organizing differently. Maybe they don't meet even because it's a cultural difference, or I don't know. I know that there has to be some activity in China and there has to be some activity in Japan, and as a fact, I know about some activity in Japan and in Taiwan. But for my work, mostly I work with the user groups in Europe and a little bit in America. And
so, what advice would you have to someone who's looking to start a new C++ user group in their area?
Well, my first advice would be to not to try to do it alone. Try to find a local network which is available to you, and I can help to widen that network to give you contacts which are in your region which you don't have yet. And with that basis, you're probably able to launch a user group quite easily today if you're living in an urban area. And if you're living in an urban area, also maybe do some research if there has been a user group which has been active, or maybe there's even an active user group. And then I have a bunch of tips regarding that on my website in the user group section, and I have given 2 talks about it with John Korb and at C++ Now and CppCon last year. And it's the most important thing I can give you is get started. It's I think it's the most important thing. If you don't get started, it's not going to go anywhere, and you're not going to see if people are interested.
Right. So just dig in one more time, just make sure I heard you right. I mean, because you have this large network of C++ developers with Meeting C++, if I was interested in starting a user group in my area, I should reach out to you and you might be able to find a list of other C++ developers in my geographic region that I could work with to start that user group, and you could help out just with communicating with those other developers?
Yes, I can. I have done this for a few user groups, and I'm very willingly to share the network I have with people, and so the newest user group, one of the newest groups is in Sofia, I have been contacted now from a German town called Wiesbaden, where now also a user group is active, and it can take a little bit to get started. But the main ingredients you need is people. So if you have co-workers, try to get them involved. And you need a location. A hackerspace can be a great location. Maybe your company has a meeting room which is able to sponsor it. And I know that some companies actually sponsor the meetings for reasons like HR. And then you need a date. And for the first meetup, it is just maybe have a talk, maybe don't have a talk. Just tell people what you plan and just make it a planning meeting. Can be very effective and also gives you good access to your local community, which then will form your user group. And the last thing again, which I only can really point at, is if you don't get started, you're not going to go anywhere.
Right, it's definitely good advice.
And I imagine if there are any of our listeners who are going to user groups that are not currently listed on meetingcpp.com, you probably want to hear from them to get their user groups added. Okay. Yeah,
meetingcpp.com is definitely a great resource if you want to find out if there is a user group in your area. Also, there's meetup.com. I'm not sure is meetup.com popular in Europe for just user groups in general?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you said that you already have the keynote speaker planned for this year's Meeting C++. Have you done much more planning, or are you already accepting speaker proposals?
Yeah, the call for papers is live, and you can find all information about that also on the website. And this year's theme track is game dev, and I'm generally looking for talks on C++. Especially for libraries, for the new standard or the current standards like C++ 11, C++ 14, if you want to do a certain talk on that. Definitely also looking for talks which, give an overview on a certain topic or present a certain library, and all kinds of C++ related talks.
Okay.
And the call for papers will be until May 27th.
Okay. I just want to ask, what has your opinion been on all the news coming out of the standardization meetings regarding C++ 17? I know you've probably read lots and lots of blog posts and different opinions. What are your feelings about it?
On the one hand, of course, C++ 17 is not what we all hoped it would be, which was kind of clear for some time if you knew the committee well, like I do. But on the other hand, I'm very glad that we seem to have now a common model to work on the standardization with. And I think all decisions which have been at the last meeting were very good, and I really like the decision that concepts did not make it in the standard. I think it's the right decision currently, as too many people were critical about it, and we should be careful in what we basically set in stone. And so I'm a big fan of the train model. I think that's a correct model, and I see that the big features which have been, trying to get ready for C++ 17, most of them are lacking like a year behind. So if you want to stick to the train model, we have to ship C++ 17 like next year, and then we have again some time to improve these features even more. And on the other hand, I think that we really should have a different look at the standard as we had it in the past. The technical specifications are actually quite serious, and the things which go in a technical specification are meant to be part of the standard. And I think that a technical specification usually has a very stable API, and it's a very solid thing to use in your code. So that I think that once concepts is available as an extension, like it is in GCC 6, or like we already have modules exist in the current version in the Microsoft compiler, and also Clang had for years kind of a model of modules. So I expect also updates on that front, so that if you really need these features, they're available, and you can, we will have more and better feedback by people using them. And I feel then it's the right time to put them in the standard and not the other way around. So, C++ 11 had to make a lot of time up for being late, and now I think we're on a constant model to ship, this each 3 years, I think is the number Herb mentioned in his last post, and I'm very fine and very good with that number. And I think that the big value of the last 5 years of standardization for me is that we have now a common model for standardization itself, and probably will make a lot easier to predict the standards after C++ 17.
Okay. Jason, do you have any other questions?
I don't believe I do.
Okay. Well, Jens, I know we can find you on Twitter at meetingcpp and the website meetingcpp.com. Do you have your own personal Twitter account or blog that you'd like to share as well?
Yes, I do have a personal Twitter account, which is floxA1. Okay. And I do not have a personal website currently. I plan to maybe to do that once my CMS is done.
Great. Well, it's been great having you on the show. I definitely encourage everyone to go to meetingcpp.com, check out the conference, check out the videos, check out the user groups. It's a really great website.
All right. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening as we chat about C++. I'd love to hear what you think of the podcast. Please let me know if we're discussing the stuff you're interested in, or if you have a suggestion for a topic, I'd love to hear that also. You can email all your thoughts to feedback@cppcast.com. I'd also appreciate if you can follow CppCast on Twitter and like CppCast on Facebook. And of course, you can find all that info and the show notes on the podcast website at cppcast.com. Theme music for this episode is provided by podcastthemes.com at cppcast.com. Theme music for this episode is provided by podcastthemes.com.